Listen, I know this is a pretty heavy episode, all things considered, given we get the backstory towards our favorite dragon girl, but this girl put octopus in her ice cream, and that just did not sit well with me. Enough with this pineapple on pizza talk, we're past that. Whatever happens, happens. This is completely different in my opinion. I mean, yeah, they have a lot of like interesting foods in this world. I mean, they have these like little balls with like something on it that they say moves and is alive, and casually is revealed that if you don't chew them well enough, they'll kind of rip out your insides. And then you just casually have someone smiling with an ice cream that's just wiggling with some octopus tentacles, and I'm like, okay, this show, I absolutely love the detail they go into with its world, because whether it's actually action and some interesting ways of dealing with creatures, they don't go overboard, they just make it seem simple, like, hey, this snake can't move after this attack, so we casually stab it in the head. Or, hey, you know, we're just gonna get over some horrible PTSD by having a comfort zone, and for someone like Curran, after being so betrayed, her comfort zone was eating delicious food, but unfortunately the weight of the world kind of came down on her, and good food cost some decent money, and that's how we got to episode 1. This show is absolutely fantastic, and as I said, it hits different. Now, I do have a full live reaction to today's episode available on the Patreon, so if you want to see that, consider supporting if you so wish, but yeah, we gotta talk about this one. I would honestly argue this is like top 3 of the season for me in terms of brand new shows that haven't come out with like a second season and stuff, because you know you're gonna like those. But in terms of new entries, this one just, it reminds me of how I felt when I first discovered the Faraway Paladin. I mean, it's one of those series where on paper, a lot of what it does is pretty similar to what we've seen before, but just taking those slight deviations, those slight detours, really changes it from being something that feels familiar to something that feels like it's just trying to be different. It's almost as if this author, when writing it, it wasn't like they were trying to prove something, as if we need to be different, we need to deviate and go against the norms that we see in these types of shows, but rather, instead of looking at it as, oh, we're going to fight slimes and snakes and things like that, and we're just going to go about it the way everyone does, the author actually took more than a second to think about how you might fight those if you were actually going up against it in a real world. When it comes to characters dealing with trauma, whether betrayal because someone stabbed you in the back, whether literally or unfortunately just betraying trust, here's the thing, while that's going to sting, especially if it's a fresh wound, these characters aren't necessarily going to just be screw the world and I hate everyone 24/7 like they typically write these scenes. You can write it in that way, and it does work out. Some of my favorite shows have done just that. But that's almost like what everyone does. Either they forget about the trauma or it's just super overblown. But this show is like, hey, here's the thing, we have our boy Nick. It was confirmed, like, he became an idol fanatic after he got betrayed, like, tossed to the curb and felt like he had no one. He just was like, you know what, this is now my people, I'm gonna go party with these idol fanatics. It sounds silly on paper, but here's the thing, what would someone do when trying to forget about the pain? They find something to consume their time and energy with. And for someone like Curran, she ends up just going and eating a bunch of fun food. You might say that's a weird, it's kind of like a juxtaposition, right? Like, hey, you go from being betrayed and robbed and left for dead to casually going to different restaurants. But that's kind of exactly what could happen. You are left for dead, you have this bag of money, what are you about to do? And then she discovers someone who's this solo adventurer who can clear dungeons all by himself, and he knows all the good locations to eat. And then she follows him, and just honestly, it's a really cute scene. It doesn't ignore the trauma and the pain of what's happened, but at the same time, it shows you that this is what people do. Yes, some people are different. Some people will just sit and mope for months and years on end. That can and will happen. However, lots of people will try to forget about their pain and will try to distract them with entertainment, whether that's food, whether that's idols and music. And then when you sit around a table, that's when you start reflecting, and that's how episode 1 kicked off. The way trauma is being presented here is really solid, because here's the thing. These characters aren't 100% connected in the way that they completely trust each other and they're never gonna second guess. They still have a long way to go, but can they still have moments where they seem like are happy? They're just enjoying the thing that makes them happy, so in return, they just kind of feel like normal people again. Absolutely. And I think it's interesting because we break the amulet in last week's episode, and I thought it was gonna be something very emotional, as if, oh, this meant a lot to her because she lost someone. Honestly, in hindsight, I should have saw it coming. But what I thought was going to happen was this dude was going to end up dead, and she would be blamed for the death, and that's why she got thrown to the curb and something like that. Because when you initially start this episode off, she's basically tries to get swindled by this merchant who says like she damaged it and she has to pay for it, and when you hear 20,000 drop down to 10,000, you know he's BS. I'm like, oh, that probably cost like 1,000 gold, and the fact that he flips him just a single coin at one point really says how like much he was trying to upsell her. So when he ends up saving her, not only getting an amulet for free, he takes his money back, I was like, oh, what's gonna happen is simply like, she's gonna rush in, maybe we'll get this guy killed, and maybe that's the direction we're going. Because I was fuzzy on how many characters were in that moment when she was like reaching out, because we got teased in episode 1, right? So I wasn't sure if there was 2 or 3 characters there. So I was like, oh, maybe he'll end up dead. And instead, they just completely destroy her. They completely just betray her. Not only that, steal her family heirloom, and all she has left is this amulet. And the idea of breaking it almost was like a release. It was that weight off her shoulders, as if everything's going to be okay again. Because here's the thing, right? From Nick's point of view, it's something that was important to her, and he's worried like she didn't even show a reaction, she must be fuming. But in actuality, it feels like finally having that broke, as if she no longer has to carry it around, as if she has to be reminded of what he did. It's not like that pain's truly gone, but at the same time, it's one less thing to carry, and one less thing to carry for someone carrying that type of burden and guilt. I mean, I absolutely love what they did there. I mean, I'm interested to see what they're going to do with this mission that they were assigned, because they say they're like rank F or something now in terms of their little guild that they formed, but I'm interested to see why they were picked specifically for this like holy sword mission, because you would think there'd be other more capable people. So I'm interested to see, because the narrator is talking like it's going to change everything for them in terms of where it leads in the future. So that's pretty exciting. But I mean, in terms of like last week, right, you know, the interesting ways they were handling slimes by just like ripping out crystals, this episode, they actually kind of went in, because usually when you see like a bug or a monster cut in half in these shows, it's just, it disintegrates, or there's not a lot of detail. This episode, they show us the guts. Not to say it was like gory or anything, but I was actually kind of surprised by they showed the meat inside this like beetle. And the fact that they just casually carve it and eat it like it's beetle jerky, I was like, okay, that's what I like about it, right? They just show those little details, and they show or do things slightly different that makes it feel like it's actually trying to be its own show, rather than just looking at every show that's hunted monsters or had an adventure party that maybe has been betrayed. Instead of just simply rehashing and retelling, they're like, hey, this can be told in a billion different ways. Why not actually make this world feel like the world's important alongside the characters? The action can be fun, but that's not the thing people are going to hype up. It's going to be the stuff about the characters and the emotional trauma that's going on with them, and that's why I really, really enjoy it. Yeah, there's some goofy animation moments from time to time, like initially when we first see the dude walk into the restaurant, he kind of slides in similar to last week when Nick kind of slid in throughout the screen. But in general, the things that they're putting the most focus on is actually those up close and personal moments, seeing the distress in characters' faces, or in the case of Curran actually just lighting up and being happy. Those are the moments that feel more important than maybe a couple of moments when a character slides across the screen and it's a little goofy. I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that this show is hitting different and it's an absolute quality production, but that's just me anyway. What did everyone think of this episode? We finally get to see some backstory. Understandable why we didn't really see it in episode 1. There would be no way to fit it in terms of having episode 1 have all 4. I thought it was great. There was some funny moments, there was some heavy moments, and definitely sets up the future in a very positive way. But thoughts and feelings yourself down below. Leave a like if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new around here. You can also hit that bell if you want to get as many notifications as possible, and you can also consider supporting the Patreon, as I mentioned, if you want to see that full live reaction. As well, you can also get video shoutouts like a few we're about to get here. So we got Luke 3496, Peterson, Silva, and Lemon Drop. So I appreciate the support, everyone. Please take care and have a good one.